Hey guys, how are you? I hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing a review of a horror film from Norway. This is spoken in the Norwegian language and English language. There's also a release that's fully in English, so if you can't find it under one and you believe that maybe it's dubbed, I don't believe it is dubbed, but I think there are two versions that have been released. So one English speaking and one with a little bit of Norwegian and English. So if you don't like subtitles and you get the version with subtitles, you won't have to contend with too many, so it shouldn't be a problem. So this is released in the year 2014, directed by Tommy Wirkola, and this movie is called Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead. So to prevent myself from giving away too much about the first one, in case you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give a terribly clear synopsis, but I'm going to try my best to make you interested in it. So basically it starts off from where the first one left, and you've got Herzog, who is the main Nazi commander of the Nazi zombies in the first movie. He is now tasked with a different mission. Now, before he died, Adolf Hitler assigned him the task of destroying this town. Now, since he died, he hasn't been able to complete his business, but now he gets the chance, and now he has got the rest of his Nazi zombie soldiers, and they're embarking on this town in order to wipe it off the map. So, in order to stop this, a group of local Norwegians, along with a zombie squad from the United States, team together in order to try and stop the onslaught from Herzog. So whether or not they can do this is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead. I was really hyped to see this film because Dead Snow is an absolutely brilliant film. I love that movie. I love the fact that it was really nasty and then really funny at the same time. So you're laughing and then all of a sudden you're shocked. Just a complete different amount of emotions in a horror comedy. And a lot of attention to detail was put into that film. It's the sort of attention to detail that you don't see in many other movies. It's either really funny and not really scary, or really scary and not really funny. Whereas that Dead Snow, the first one, blended it in absolutely perfectly. I thought there's some really scary moments, some very, very nasty, violent moments, and also some very funny moments. That's everything you want from a dark sort of horror comedy, is that fine blend between horror and comedy. And I thought Dead Snow was one of the better ones that have actually done that. And also it pays homages to films of the past, such as Evil Dead, classics of these films. And I thought that Dead Snow was made by a genuine horror fan. So coming into Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead, I thought it would fall under the curse of a sequel not being as good as the original, which is the case. I don't feel that Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead is as good as Dead Snow, but I will say that it is still very enjoyable, and if you like the first one, chances are you'll get something out of this one. Now, I like the fact that it is a continuation, so basically it feels like a massive film, just in two parts, and so that allows Tommy Wirkola to use the same story. He doesn't have to do anything terribly different, he just has to continue on. So I like it. I think that is a smart way of doing things, and it gives you an excuse of doing everything that was successful in the first film. So coming into Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead, I was expecting something very violent, and it is very violent, and I was expecting something very funny, and it was very funny. But my problem with Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead was the level of comedy and violence that the first one had wasn't quite as different. I mean, it is a very funny movie, but the violence was done in a comedic way as well. So it didn't hit you with that shocking value that the first one did, and it didn't really leave you thinking, should I be laughing at this? Because the really shocking moments in the film are very, very funny. Whereas the first one, yeah, there are some very funny moments of violence, the shocking violence, but there are moments that aren't funny, and it just really hits you out of the blue and you don't know what to feel. Whereas this movie is definitely more of a comedy, and it actually felt like it was slightly Americanized. You've got the English-speaking Americans in the film, which is something, I can understand. And you've got a little bit of Norwegian amongst the natives, which is something I appreciated. It felt like Tommy Wirkola was still paying respect to his homeland. But I just felt that, the American way of doing horror comedies, it was just, the violence was so over the top. It was so funny. And so when it hits you with a shocking scene, it's not that shocking. Whereas the first one, some of the violence was very nasty. And I just felt to myself, wow, that was very painful. In this movie, you don't quite get that. There are some scenes that are shocking, especially involving children, which I liked. It shows that Tommy Wirkola has a really sick sense of humour. The characters in this film were fairly decent. Surprisingly, I liked the zombie squad. I thought they were funny. And the main character from the first one is in this one. And he has a strange power that I thought was pretty cool. And it does have some very funny moments in the set pieces. And so as a horror comedy, I thought the comedy was very good, but the horror element of it, it just wasn't that scary. It's just a very entertaining film, whereas the first one did have a little bit of scariness in it. And so the first one felt like a much nastier experience, whereas Dead Snow, Red vs. Dead, it just gets a little bit silly. Now, I could appreciate that. As I said, it is a horror comedy. You're not expecting something along the lines of Martyrs or Inside. What you want is a movie that you can enjoy yourself with, and that's exactly what Dead Snow Red vs. Dead does. I thought there were moments in it that were very smart. It kind of felt like a history lesson amongst all the exaggerated carnage. I'm not going to give away anything there, but there are moments that you can really enjoy, and therefore I would highly recommend you check out Dead Snow Red vs. Dead if you were a fan of the original. As I said, not as good as the first film, but because it's a continuation, it's kind of like the same story, it doesn't really matter. So therefore, for Dead Snow Red vs. Dead, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars, and I'm going to recommend it. Alright guys, that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.